So in the last video, you guys saw me work on my 300ZX that hasn't been running in years. Well, we finally figured out the issue, and turns out we just had a really bad pump inside of the fuel tank. Yeah, this thing was just covered in rust, so we cleaned up the whole assembly and wired in a brand new fuel pump. And after doing all of that, we were finally able to get her started after all of these years.
Man, after like 4 or 5 years, this thing is finally up and running.
Hello, my name is Kevin, and welcome to my channel where I like to transform old junky cars into really nice street dailies using cheap and affordable methods. Alright guys, so for today's video, I'm just going to do some general maintenance. We finally got it up and running. Now I'm just going to touch up on like things that I need to fix and just in general you need to do when you get a new car. First things first, you guys did see that my front passenger wheel, it was a little stuck whenever I was trying to move it up forward. So then I'm gonna go ahead and raise the car up, take the wheel off, and we're gonna go ahead and inspect this area right here, see exactly why it was stuck and locked up. I'm thinking just the brake calipers were probably seized up, and so I'm gonna take it all apart and clean it up, and yeah, nothing too serious, but let's get to it. Now for this job, since I'm taking off the brake calipers, you'll just need a basic set of tools, one that has a good range of sockets. But later into the video, you'll see me buying more tools because we actually run into a lot more problems. Alright, so just got my 19 with a breaker bar, and I'm going to use this as an extension. Yeah, before lifting the car up on jack stands, I like to break the lug nuts loose on the ground. But if you have an impact gun, you can go ahead and lift the car up and just break the lug nuts loose with that tool. And of course we gotta bring out the low profile jack with the piece of wood combo. But before we get it up on jack stands, I'm just gonna pull the e-brake and put the car into gear. That way, the car won't accidentally roll off as we're trying to lift it up. These steps are especially important if your driveway is on a hill or a little uneven like mine. Alright, so I'm about to get ready to lift this car up. But guys, here is a prime example of a 40-year-old rust bucket. The pinch welds are basically non-existent, so it's exactly why I have this piece of wood with me, in order to get proper contact when lifting up this car. Yeah, it's always sketchy when I'm lifting this car up, especially with how heavy it is. I'm always afraid of punching a hole in the underside. But check it out guys, because of how rusty it is, here's how I have my setup. I've got the two jack stands on the usual spots where the quote-unquote pinch welds are supposed to be. But also, I'm using two of my hydraulic floor jacks as extra support. I've got one on the side and then this one right here supporting the car on the cross member. With a setup like this, I'm feeling confident the car won't fall on me as I'm working on it. So yeah, let's go ahead and get to it, starting with taking off the wheel. As we get a closer look, we've got our caliper, rotor, and hub assembly. Yeah, it's pretty rusty and dusty in here from sitting all this time. Now for this video, our main focus is the brake caliper, so we're going to fully take this off and we'll try to clean and restore it ourselves. And as we take a look at the back of the caliper, we've got a total of 5 bolts to undo. Starting with the 2 bolts that go into the slider pins. These are going to be 14mm. Just got one on the bottom and one up top. Now after getting those 2 bolts out, I'm gonna go ahead and grab me a flathead and I'm just gonna pry this part of the caliper off that's connected with the brake hose, and I'm just gonna zip tie it to the coilover so that it's out of my way. Actually, I kind of did this whole process out of order. It'd be better if you just take off the brake hose first. That way you can fully separate the caliper and just set it off to the side. But anyways, I'll go ahead and take off these brake pads as well as the metal shims that help guide them. If any of these parts are stuck on there, just grab a flathead and pry them off. Alright, and once that's done, we're going to swap out our 14mm socket for a 19mm, and we're going to remove the 2 bolts that's holding the rest of the caliper onto the hub. Alright, now with the brakes fully off, I'm kind of just fiddling with the rotor to see if there's any play in it. It seems to spin freely and I don't see any wobbles in it. Later in the video, we'll be taking all of it off anyways and giving it some new grease. And so lastly, we'll have to disconnect the brake hose from the caliper. So I've just got my 14mm on here to break it loose. And just be careful here because it'll get quite messy. Since you're breaking this line, all of the brake fluid is going to be pouring out. So make sure you have like a drip pan or a rag with you. Alright, and with that we've got our brakes fully removed. This part right here is the main thing we'll be messing with. It's what holds the piston inside and pushes your brake pads in and out. Alright, so the issue that I think I have with the car is that maybe the piston inside of this caliper is seized up from the rust and brake dust. And just from looking at it from right here, we can see that the dust boot is actually lifted up from the spot that it's supposed to be sealing. So that right there is allowing all of that dirt and grime to get up in there. But before we start getting into the repair, I'm going to tell you guys now that this was actually not my core issue as to why my wheel was locking up. However, a seized piston could cause that. It just so happens that my 40-year-old car has a bunch of failing parts that I need to fix and replace. Alright, so I'm out here at Harbor Freight getting tools and whatever. Take a look at what I just spotted. That motherfucker clean. I feel like it's a worker's, but with the windows down, it could be just the customers. Yeah, whoever owns this RX-7 definitely has good taste. Just seeing it sit here in its original state kind of takes you back to a time when things were much more simpler and more graceful when it came to car design. Oh, and it's stick shift. Try my best not to get the license plate. Yes, sir. Bone stock. Yeah, that was clean. Left-hand drive. Surprisingly, those things are a lot smaller than I thought. Pretty cool. That's a really nice spot. But now that we're back home, here's everything that I picked up from this Harbor Freight trip. Most importantly, I needed an air chuck with a rubber tip. Alright, so now I've got all of the brake components here laid out and organized. We're going to focus on trying to get that piston out of the caliper, and after that we'll clean all of the parts off with a wire wheel and then give it a finishing touch with some spray paint. Now at first, I was going to try to pull the piston out with just these channel lock pliers, but the piston was really stuck in there. This thing would not budge no matter how hard I pulled, and also I didn't want to risk tearing the boot or damaging the piston itself. So a much easier way to get this piston out is a method that I found online. They're saying to shoot it out with compressed air. So for this, you will need an air compressor as well as the air chuck with the rubber tip. Real quick though, I'm just going to spray some WD-40 into this rubber boot and get it out of there. That way it won't rip as I'm shooting the piston out. Honestly though, if you're doing this job, just go ahead and buy brand new replacement seals for this. They're only a couple bucks from the auto parts store and it'll just save you so much time and energy. See, I was trying to be cheap here and was planning to reuse the old seals, but it just wasn't working out for me. So in the end, I ended up replacing these with brand new ones. And I'll show you why later on. But yeah, I'm just spraying more WD-40 into the piston, trying to break up that rust. Like I said, I wasn't able to pull it out with these pliers, so instead we'll be using the air chuck to blow it out. And it's important that you get this rubber tip, that way you won't have any air leaks whenever you're trying to build up the pressure. This set from Harbor Freight should have everything that you need to attach it to your air hose. And also, I just had my air compressor set to 90 psi. That should be plenty to push this piston right out. Alright, and with everything connected, all we gotta do is blow the compressed air into the hole where the brake hose was connected. And for safety, don't be a dummy like me and hold the caliper in your hand while you're doing this. The piston will fly out of there, so just try your best not to injure yourself. Damn. Alright, and there we are guys. Now that we've got that piston out, we can fully inspect the inside and see how bad it is. It looks like there's some sludge and buildup inside of there. You definitely don't want none of that inside of the lines, or else it'll clog up. As for the piston itself, we could definitely see how bad it got just from having that boot lifted up and not sealing it properly. Yeah, this thing is in real bad shape. Because of all of that dirt and grime that got inside of there, it's caused a lot of deep scratches and scoring on the walls. Now since I am trying to be cheap here, I was just gonna attempt to sand it all down and, you know, try to polish it up myself. But honestly, if yours looks like this, just replace it with a brand new one. Having a piston that's heavily pitted like this one, it'll screw up the rubber seals and, you know, just eventually fail your entire brake system. Nevertheless, here's me trying to reuse old parts in order to save some nickels and dimes. And then to clean the inside, I basically just do the same thing. Clean it out with the rag first and then hit it with some sandpaper. And to get into these tight spots where the rubber seals go, just hit it with like a razor blade or a pick and then maybe like a wire brush just to knock off all that surface rust. That way your new seals will properly sit in there. Now this one right here, this is the inner square seal. Be sure to take it out so you can clean in there and replace it with a brand new one. I made the mistake of trying to reuse it, and like I said before, I ended up having to get brand new ones because it wasn't allowing me to push the piston back in. So yeah, definitely had to replace it. And so right here, I was just attempting to put the piston back into place just to see if it would fit after cleaning everything. But obviously it's dry, I haven't looped it up, and it's got that old seal inside of there. Yeah, apparently after cleaning and replacing all the seals, it's supposed to slide in real easy, at least from the videos that I saw. But anyways, after cleaning up the piston and the inside of the caliper, I'm just gonna hit the outside now with a wire wheel just to get all that brake dust off and start preparing it for spray paint. Since I'm going through all the trouble to clean it all up, I might as well make it look pretty, right? And check this out, y'all. Look at how rusty it was inside of where the slider pins go. Definitely gonna have to loop this up with some silicone grease before we install it back together. And then an easy way to clean these out is you just want to roll up a piece of sandpaper, just enough to where you can slip it in and sand it down. Get rid of whatever's left in there. For spray paint, I just had some left over actually, but I believe I picked this up from O'Reilly's. I'm sure you can find it at any auto parts store, but just make sure you get one that's rated for high temp. Now I've got to sand it down with 220 grit sandpaper, and then after that, just make sure you degrease it. That way whenever you're going to spray paint, you don't have any like weird chemical reactions to like dirt and debris. Now as for taping up the holes, it's real simple. You just rip off a little piece and then really press down on the hole. That way you can see the outline, and then just grab you a knife and, you know, cut out the edges. Not really a difficult process, just really time consuming. You know how the saying goes, a good paint job is good prep work. And well, actually what sucks about this is that I had to do this job twice, because later in the video I spilled a bunch of brake fluid all over it, and yeah, that was no bueno. But besides that, I might as well just show you guys, you know, how to spray paint your calipers. You can do it any color you want. Usually I prefer to just go straight black. If you want to make it look sporty, you can go ahead and do red. And I go ahead and just spray like 2 or 3 layers onto them. Just give it a real thick coat, so don't really worry about drips. It'll all get covered up by brake dust anyways, so. Alright, and here's how they look freshly painted. And I'm gonna go ahead and just let this dry overnight, and we'll continue this in the next morning. And here it is fully dried. I did miss a couple spots, but it is what it is. But finally, we're gonna go ahead and focus on getting that piston back inside. This process right here is probably where I struggled the most, especially since I was trying to reuse the old seals and dust boot. Basically over time, the rubber seal and dust boot is so worn out from the piston sliding in and out. After all these years of braking, yeah, from all that wear and tear, they basically lose its shape and don't perform as they should. Mine are basically stretched out at this point, and so they won't fit into place as they should. And right here, I'm just trying to show you guys where the dust boot is supposed to fit into. It's got that little lip inside the cylinder and press it into. And there's 2 ways that you can do this. You can either install the boot first, or you can try to slip the boot over the piston and install both of them at the same time. I tried both methods out to see which was easier to do, but it wasn't really working out for me because, like I said, these boots are worn out, and it just would not conform to that lip that it's supposed to sit into. But right here though, I did find a little bit of success. I was able to squeeze the dust boot inside of there, but I mean, just looking at it from the top, you could tell that's not really seating in there properly. Like on the left side, you can see that it's a little bent. And right here, I'm just kind of pulling on it to see if it's actually seated in there, which it seems like it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on and try to slide this piston in. We're just gonna lube it up a little bit with some brake fluid. Now if you're doing this method, you can't just straight up push the piston back in. You've got to lift that dust boot up and over the piston, and then once it's all the way around, only then can you press it back in. You could probably lift it up and over using a pick, but I didn't have one at the time. And so a method that I saw online is that a really easy way to do this is to use compressed air. Just like how we popped it out, you simply do the same thing, blow air through the cylinder, and that will basically lift up the dust boot for you so that you can easily slip the piston in and then press it back into place. However, this wasn't working out for me because, like I said, the dust boot is worn out and wasn't sitting properly in its place. So every time I blew the compressed air, it just flung right out. Thinking back on it now, I probably should have just lowered the PSI. But anyways, I was messing with it so much that I ended up tearing the boot. And so at this point, I was like, screw it, let me get this old seal out of there. I'm just gonna replace all of the rubber for both sides. It's what I should have done in the first place, and it's only a couple of bucks to order these. So I got myself a pick and just pulled it out. Yeah guys, if you're going through all the trouble to clean your calipers, just go ahead and replace all of the rubber. And now since this is out of there, now I can really clean that area where the rubber seal sits. Oh, and this right here is the square cut seal. It's actually responsible for pulling and retracting the piston back in every time you apply the brakes. And seeing as how we're having issues with the piston seizing up, I definitely ought to just change this out. Okay, so I try my best to clean out the lip where all of the rubber seals sit, and hopefully the new ones should sit in there nice and tightly. Alright, so check it out. I've got all the brand new rubber. I went ahead and got them from O'Reilly's because I just wanted these ASAP. But all of these components, you can easily order them online through Rock Auto, probably for a better price as well. But check it out, y'all. If we do a quick visual comparison, you can easily just tell that the old one looks slightly larger than the new one. Yeah, I'm gonna bet that these are gonna be a way better fit and a lot easier to install. And now just test fitting that square cut seal onto the piston. The new one fits really snug, and then when we try the old one, yeah, it's all loosey-goosey. It's no wonder I wasn't able to get the piston back in. So we're moving on to the install with our brand new rubber. I'm just gonna lube it up real quick with a little bit of brake fluid. And to put this back in, it's really easy. You just run your finger all along the line and it should seat itself in there properly. Now with the brand new dust boot, we're just going to slip this over the piston, making sure that it's oriented in the correct way. You want to slip it over on the very bottom and then extend the rubber boot a little bit past the piston so that when you're going to place it back into the cylinder, you can seat that rubber boot first and then you could try to press the piston in. Yeah, doing it this time around worked a lot better, especially since the rubber is the correct size. Again, you could just use your finger to kind of squeeze it in there, but if you're having trouble, then just get your pick and kind of like, you could push the rubber boot in. But guys, we were finally able to get it in there, and all we got to do now is just press the piston back into the cylinder. I'm just going to use my bare hands to kind of get it started, and once it's aligned, I'm just going to press it in using a flat piece of wood and a huge C-clamp. Oh, and actually before installing the piston, you just want to make sure you lightly lube it up with brake fluid. That way as you're pushing it in, it's not a dry rub. You don't want to risk ruining that seal that's inside of there. And guys, finally we were able to get this piston back inside. Pretty much done with the hard part. We cleaned it all up and we were able to get it back inside. Now hopefully our brakes won't seize up now that it's all cleaned up. I'm just gonna pull on the boot just to make sure it's properly sealed in there. And yeah, since we're all done with that, I'm just gonna go ahead and clean it up, sand it once again, and then get some spray paint on there since all of that brake fluid was eating away at it. So if you're gonna attempt this job, just go ahead and try to put the piston back in first and then you can spray paint it. Alright, so since we're going through all the trouble to make the brake calipers look nice and pretty, we might as well clean up the rotor and the hub, just to give it a nice complete look. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys the process of taking this whole assembly off. First off, I'm just gonna grab a wire brush and clean off all this dirt and debris. The center piece needs to come out, so I'm gonna grab a flathead and a hammer and we're just gonna punch it out. Just give it a few taps all around and you'll be able to pull it right off. And now once that's off, we're able to see the insides of the spindle. Got a couple of things to take out, starting with a cotter pin. Just gonna go ahead and bend that straight and then we'll try to pull it right out. It helps to grab on one side with a set of pliers and then hammer out the other end. That way you can easily tap it out as you're pulling at the same time. And after removing the cotter pin, you can now take off this crown looking cap. And after that, we've got this locking nut to remove. For the life of me, I can't remember the size of it, but these shouldn't be too tight on there. You can just loosen it with a pair of channel locks. They're basically supposed to be finger tight. And once those are removed, you can basically pull the rotor and hub off all in one piece. Just be careful because there's still a washer and a bearing inside of there that we got to take out. Okay, so once you got it off of that spindle, just go ahead and remove that washer as well as the outer bearing. Alright, so what I want to do for this is I want to get the rotors resurfaced and I want to spray paint the face of the hub. And for these cars, they're actually bolted into each other. So we're just going to flip it on its back and take out the 5 bolts using a 14mm socket. It helps to soak it in some WD-40 for a bit before breaking them loose. And I'm going to go ahead and use my impact gun to get these out. Now if you don't have one of these tools, you can just set the rotor up in a vice grip and then use a breaker bar to get them loose. And also there's going to be a crush washer, so make sure you don't lose that either. And now even though we got all of the bolts out, it's still kind of stuck together because of the rust. So we're simply just going to tap it out with a punch and a hammer. Alright, so here I am at O'Reilly's. You could either take your rotors to O'Reilly's or AutoZone. Either one can resurface your rotors for a small fee. However, the worker was a little worried that it wouldn't fit inside of the chuck because of how weird the design was. Well, he tried it anyways, but in the end I received a phone call that they were unable to do it. Basically the rotor was too far gone and yeah, I think I kind of got suckered into buying just brand new ones. It's all good though. Anyways, I've got all the components laid out on the table to clean up. And here's how to take out the brake dust shield. It's just held on by 3 screws. Alright, and so to clean these parts off, I'm just going to use a rag, a wire brush, and some sandpaper to do the job. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and mask off the hub, making sure none of the spray paint gets inside the bearings or on the lug studs. And here is how it looks after it's all sprayed down. Looks really good in my opinion. Alright, so we're gonna have to re-grease the inside of this hub before reinstalling it onto the car. So first things first, let's make sure it's really clean inside there. You don't want any of the old grease mixing in with the new grease. Especially with this one, it looks like there's a bunch of gunk in there. It's a little hard to see on the camera, but I tried my best to clean it all out. But now we're just gonna fill her up with some nice good red grease. Here's what I'll be using. I just picked it up from O'Reilly's. Just make sure it's a high temp disc wheel bearing grease. Apparently red grease is the best one to use for these bearings. Not specifically this brand, but you know, just make sure it's got this label right here to ensure that you're using the correct grease. Now as for the amount, you want to be really generous with it. So don't be afraid to, you know, just really goop it up. This hub is going to be spinning all along the spindle anyways, so you don't want any dry spots. Now if you guys want a really detailed video of reassembling your Z31 hub, I'm gonna go ahead and link y'all the video that I watched. It was really detailed and just shows you how to do it step by step. And also guys, there's actually an inner bearing on the back side of this hub that you're supposed to take out and clean and re-grease. I actually skipped that part, which I think was a mistake, because I'm assuming that's the main reason why my wheel isn't spinning, along with my brakes being seized up. But yeah, here's what the insides look like now. Got it all covered up with the red grease. Alright, so now after doing that, we've come to this important part of re-greasing the bearing itself. And as you can see, I've got it all cleaned up. This part, along with the inner bearing, is what allows the wheel to spin along the spindle. So you want to make sure this is greased up properly, otherwise the wheel won't spin. Alright, so basically what you want to do is just grab you a nice swab of the red grease and then spread it along your palm like a ball. And then we're going to grab the bearing and kind of spin it across our palm. Trying to push and squeeze all of that grease in between the bearing components. As you're pushing and rotating the bearing into your palm, it should basically eat up the grease, and you'll notice you're doing it correctly when it's starting to push out from the sides of the bearing. Okay, so here are the brand new rotors that I had to buy. It's got plenty of meat on it. Cost me a whopping 80 bucks for each side. So yeah, I wasn't planning on spending that much money for this job, but had to do what I had to do. Probably should have got brake pads along with it, but anyways, when you get brand new rotors, you gotta spray it off with some brake cleaner just to ensure that it's clean. And to reassemble, we're just gonna stick the hub right inside of the rotor, and we'll line up the holes and try to get all those bolts back into there. Okay, we've got our brand new rotor mounted up with our hub. Now it looks really clean. Alright, now we're going to move on to reinstalling everything back onto the spindle. Before we throw it on there, you just want to lube it up with some grease. Hey guys, be sure to put on your brake dust shield first before putting the rotor back on. I forgot to do that, and so I basically had to do this entire process twice. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and just show you how to reinstall it. It's pretty much the same process of taking it out, just in reverse. So we'll start by putting the rotor and hub back onto the spindle, followed by the outer bearing. And then after the bearing, you gotta put the washer in. Just make sure you have this oriented correctly. The spindle itself has a notch in it so that this could slide right into its place. And after the washer, we're gonna put this locking nut back on. You just want to spin it on there all the way finger tight, and then finish it off with the channel locks and torquing it down just ever so slightly. Okay, and after that, just stick this crown looking piece right over it. And after that, make sure to reinstall a cotter pin. I actually broke mine and forgot to get another one, so I'll have to do that off camera. But that's pretty much it. Once it's all reassembled, just get the cap and kind of lightly tap it back on, and we should be all done. Okay, now we're going to move on to reassembling the brake caliper. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get these slider pins and try to clean them off as best as we can. I just got some 400 grit sandpaper here, and I want to get off all that surface rust. Now we'll lube it up with some silicone grease. We'll also be using this for the brake pads. And when applying it, just give it a light, even coat all around. And to reinsert it, you just slide it right in and then flip the dust boot back over the seal, and then go ahead and wipe off the excess grease. Alright, so let's start reassembling the brakes, starting with this piece right here that bolts into the hub. And putting everything back together is pretty straightforward. We're just doing the reverse of how we took it out. For this part of the caliper that has the piston, I only put in one bolt on the top so that I can leave it flipped up as I'm trying to put the brake pads back in. Like I said, just make sure you grease up these metal shim parts and then grease the ears of the brake pads. so now we're finally done with both sides. We've got brand new rotors, we greased up the bearing and the spindle, brake caliper back on there along with the brake hose connected. Now the only thing left we gotta do is bleed the brakes. This Z31 calls for .3 brake fluid, so I'm gonna go ahead and just use this. I guess the brake fluid is pretty full in here, but I'm gonna just go ahead and top it off a little bit to see if there's any level changes as we pump the brakes. And if you've ever had to bleed your brakes before, you probably already know about this little bottle trick. With just a plastic bottle and some tubing, you can easily create a system where you can push out the air and purge it out of the lines, all the while sucking in fluid. And this method makes it to where you don't need a second person to pump the brakes while you continuously open and close the bleeder valve. All you need to do is pour in some brake fluid into the bottle, just enough to where you can submerge the hose down in there, and then we'll connect the other side of the hose onto the bleeder valve. And that way it should create a vacuum and allow us to easily pump the brakes without sucking air up into the line. Be sure to find a tube that fits nice and snug on your bleeder valve. Home Depot has a bunch of rolls with different diameters, so yeah, just make sure you got the right one. Alright, and now I'm just going to open up the bleeder valve with a 10mm wrench. And all I gotta do now is jump inside and start pumping on the brakes. Theoretically, all of the air should be purging outwards as you step onto the brakes, and then once you release it, all the fluid on the bottom should be getting sucked up into the brake caliper. Alright, so right now we're looking at the driver's side, and as of right now I'm pumping on the brakes. Just pumping, but for some reason, the brake fluid isn't getting sucked into the brake caliper. It seems to just be falling short. And well, actually on the passenger side, nothing was even happening as I was pumping. It seems like there's no pressure whatsoever on that side. So I went ahead and had my nephew come out here and I just had him pump the brakes while I was looking at the master cylinder. I wanted to see if the fluid was going up and down at least as he was pumping, but nothing at all was happening. At this point, I'm kind of just feeling like the brake master cylinder itself has gone faulty on me, so I decided I needed to take it out and order a new one. But before that, I actually went back to Harbor Freight to get this kit right here. I was thinking that if I can't pump the brake fluid out, then I want to see if this tool was able to suck it all out. But it ended up not working, and I pretty much just wasted my money and time with this.
Working, none of that old fluid is getting through. I swear I thought I saw it go down just ever so slightly, but it's still pretty full and nothing is really going down. Give it a few pumps.
And since there was no action going on whatsoever, I decided that I needed to pull it off just to inspect it and see what's up with it. Maybe just the brake master cylinder itself is having issues. And as I was looking for solutions online, I learned that the brake master cylinder itself can get air trapped inside of there. And so then you would have to take it out and bench bleed it. Alright, and since I need to get to the brake master cylinder, I needed to get this windshield washer fluid reservoir out of my way. All you gotta do is just pull it out and set it off to the side. And I thought this was pretty interesting. There's a whole bunch of wires connected to the reservoir. Is this really all just for the windshield fluid?
Alright, so it looks like just to take this off, I see 2 bolts that's connecting it to the brake booster. I'm thinking hopefully if we just take those 2 out and then disconnect it from the brake lines, the 3 brake lines, then this should come on.
Alright, so in order to get the brake lines off, you'll need a size 10 wrench. The fittings on these hard lines are actually they're very easy to round off, and instead of regular wrenches, I'd recommend getting a set of flare nut wrenches. These are designed to specifically go on hard lines such as this.
What do you know? That I knew I bought a complete set. I managed to find every single size except for the one that I needed, which is the 10. Basically, you need one of these. I kind of just throw all of my specialty tools in bags, and they're just scattered everywhere. So it's no wonder I have these problems of losing tools. All right, check me out. Came back with some new tools. Got me a little swivel vise. I'm probably gonna bolt this into a wooden board of some sort. Anyways, got what I needed. It's got that 10 on there. Also, went ahead and grabbed this. I'll be using this to bench bleed the master cylinder.
make sure you throw a rag underneath the lines to catch whatever brake fluid drips out of there when you're taking these off. So now I gotta remove the 2 bolts that's holding it into the brake booster. I've got this weird setup here with the swivel attachment and all, but honestly you could just use a wrench. Alright, and with everything taken out, we can finally now pull this brake master cylinder off. And take a look at this, guys. Man, this thing is so old. I think it's the original brake master cylinder. It hasn't been changed out in all of these years. I wouldn't be surprised if this was part of my issue of why my brakes failed. In here I just wanted to push in the brakes to see if that push rod was working. Yeah, just trying to see if there's anything up with the brake booster. Like maybe it wasn't fully engaging the brake master cylinder. But it looks okay to me, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to another thing that I wanted to try is to blow compressed air into the hard lines itself. I'm thinking potentially there could be a line that's clogged up and that's why the brakes aren't working properly. So, and for reference, this line right here is for the driver's side, and this one is for the passenger, and the third one is for the rear brakes. And then I kind of just have it pointed into an empty bottle so that I can catch whatever blows out of there. And nothing much, I mean just a little bit of dirty brake fluid, but that's about it. I didn't see any dirt nibs or anything weird clogging up the lines. On both sides, this is what the fluid looked like.
Alright, so seeing as how the lines were all clear of debris, nothing was in there clogging it up, I'm just gonna assume that this master cylinder itself is just a piece of crap. Hasn't been changed out in all these years, and honestly it just has bad brake fluid inside of there. Alright, so I went ahead and dumped it out into this bucket, but as you can see there's a whole bunch of muck and debris inside of there. Alright, so tried to clean it out as best as I could. There's still some kind of like mud up in there.
Alright, so now we're going to focus on bench bleeding the brake master cylinder. They say you're supposed to do this whenever you get a new one, so once that comes in I'll have to do this once again. So I'm just going to use this as practice because I've never done it before. And we'll be utilizing this brake bleeder kit I picked up from O'Reilly's, and since this brake master cylinder has 3 ports, I had to buy 2 packages because they only come with 2 hoses. But anyways, it's super simple to use, really easy to set up. All you gotta do is find the fitting that fits into your port, screw it in, make sure it's airtight, and then you set up your hoses by connecting one end to the bleeder nipple and then the other end into the cup of the brake master cylinder. And after that we'll just submerge it all in brake fluid. It's basically the same principle as the bottle trick whenever you're bleeding the brake lines. It's supposed to be pushing the fluid all throughout the system and purging all of the air out. So now that we have it all set up, sitting here on the vise, I'm trying to push in the piston that's inside this brake master cylinder, but for some reason it's not giving way. On a properly working master cylinder, you're supposed to be able to push it in and then it'll push back out, but somehow, some way, it's failed, and this is probably why my brakes weren't bleeding correctly. It must be all seized up in there.
Alright, so check it out. Brand new brake master cylinder from O'Reilly's. Looks pretty similar. Yeah, the inside looks quite different from the original.
Alright, now that I've got the brand new one all set up, let's go ahead and see if it works.
It's working. Yes.
Now as you can see here, I'm able to push in the master cylinder in and out. This is how it's supposed to function properly. And when we take a closer look at the lines, you can see all the air bubbles purging from the valves. And so after doing that for some time, I figured we could throw it back into the car. I've still got all the tubes hooked up so that I could just quickly connect the hard lines into the master cylinder without losing so much fluid or risking getting air back into the master cylinder. I know it's hard to see, but basically I'm just bolting the master cylinder back into the brake booster, and then once it's sturdy, I'm then taking off the tubing and then putting the brake lines back on.
Alright, finally, I even plugged this shit up.
Alright, so now that we finally got it in, we're looking at the passenger side, the one that we have issues with. Now I'm pumping the brakes, and as we look at the tubing, there's fluid being pushed out, but for some reason it's not sucking anything in. It just completely stops. Like, I'm still pumping right here, but the levels aren't changing at all, so I wasn't really sure what that was about. And fun fact, I actually took the master cylinder off again and had to bench bleed it once again, you know, because I wanted to make sure I did it correctly. But here's the driver's side. As you can see, we were able to bleed it properly. There's still a little bit of bubbles in there, but we've got brake fluid all throughout the line.
So anyways, back to the whole reason why I was making this video in the first place. This should be able to, well, it's not working. This is supposed to spin freely, but I think just because there's so much pressure for me pumping the brakes, it's kind of stuck. So why is this side stuck but that side not? Alright, so went ahead and moved the cars around. Got the RSX sitting right here, Civic over there. That way I can have the Z31 here right in the middle so that I can start preparing to paint it. I wanted to move it out from underneath the tree, that way we won't have all of that debris just flying onto the car while I'm painting. Anyways, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I pretty much gave up at this point. Alright, so it's been like a week since ordering a new brake hose. This is for the passenger side. None of my local auto parts store had them on hand, so I had to order this from Rock Auto.
Basically, I read online that maybe the piston won't retract because this rubber hose could potentially be clogged up from the inside. And while it's able to push out fluid, it's not able to suck back in. So we're just going to replace it, bleed the brakes once again, and see if it'll work. Okay, so to do this, I'm just going to break the bleeder to relieve any pressure. And now I'll grab my 14 mil and get this bolt loose. It connects the old hose line to the caliper. And then once you get that off, you just have to separate that metal clip that holds the hose to the hard line, and then undo the hard line with a 10 mil. Well, would you look at that. Now that we got a brand new brake hose, we're able to bleed it properly and fluid is easily passing through there. Okay, I've got everything tightened down. I've got the master cylinder topped off with fluid. With everything put together, I'm just gonna give the brakes a couple of pumps, you know, get some pressure going on in there, and hopefully that piston should be able to retract. by the way, here's the Rock Auto magnet that I got from this order.
Alright, new issue has arose.
Guys, so you know that we replaced the brake line, took apart the caliper, cleaned up the piston. Maybe we didn't clean it good enough, but I don't know.
See, right now it spins just fine. But then whenever I went to put the wheel on, it got stuck again. So I took my time to take the wheel off. Once again, I pulled the caliper off, just this part. I just took off this bolt, flipped it up, and then I pressed in the piston so that, you know, this rotor could freely move again. So now there's no pressure in there. I'm gonna put the wheel back on, and then I'm gonna drop the car. Maybe I'll start her up, and I'll see if I'll just go back and forth and see if the brakes work properly. Hopefully it won't get stuck again. I don't know.
Look, we replaced the brake line. At this point, I think it's just a crappy piston inside of there. It was just really like pitted, and yeah, the walls on it were just, they were not good. So I'm thinking maybe I might just need to get a refurbished caliper itself with a brand new piston that's all nice and polished up, no pits whatsoever. And maybe that would solve the issue. Man, I don't know. Wow. Okay, guys, I think I found the issue after all this time. The brakes needed to be addressed, but the main issue, the real issue, reason why this thing doesn't spin, I put the wheel back on, I've got it torqued down, the brakes aren't even engaged at all. That piston is fully inside of the caliper. Look at this, I'm trying to move it, it won't budge at all. So then that leads me to, I feel like there's just an issue within the spindle, and I think the issue is the bearing that we did not touch at all. The inside bearing that's held in with that seal on the back side of the rotor hub assembly, whatever. There's just so much gunk in there. It's not properly lubed up, and then whenever this is pressed in all the way, the wheel is just sandwiching all of that together, and you know, without any lube in there, it won't spin. That was the main issue from the get-go. I can't believe I spent all this time fiddling with the damn brakes when it wasn't even that. All right, guys, hey, look at this. Look, I'm just gonna wrap this video up. I'm gonna edit it, I'm gonna get it out for y'all. This video will be the brake video essentially. Next video, I'm gonna get that bearing out, especially now that I have that vise. I can set it up in the vise, I can punch it out, punch out that seal. I'm gonna have to order a new one. It's a whole process. All right, I'm gonna see you guys for the next one.